Welcome back, everyone, to Startup Security Weekly. I'm Paul Jordan. I'm here with Michael Santarcangelo, talking about some of the articles and news in the startup world, focusing on security as we do on this show. This article is very interesting, Michael. The 5 biggest product development mistakes. And this isn't necessarily startup related, dude. These are, these are
well, it's kind of like if people follow the stuff that I curate, like a lot of times I'll put up articles about, educating children, and I'll say, look, this doesn't apply to kids. This applies to everybody. This is definitely one of those where I read it, and I put in our notes. I mean, this one's for you. I didn't mean it, just so everybody's clear, in that I think that you're making these mistakes. It's that we talk about this a lot, and as we're finding our feet underneath us, a lot of people write in, and we've started to notice a theme. A lot of us, as you already said earlier in the show during our interview, we've got that experience consulting. We've got the services experience, and then we have an idea for a product. Great. Whoa, building a product is not the same thing as offering a service. And
And what this article speaks to, something I actually wanted to talk to Michael Tangi about, and we just didn't have time to bring him back on the show, and that is, there is, I believe, a more stringent process for software development and product management that I think a lot of startups kind of cut corners on. And I get it. I mean, inevitably you have to at some point, right? And I think the companies that come from professional services do that a little more often because the culture is so different. If I'm a services company,
that's a good point.
I can just go grab my laptop, or if I'm a construction company, right? It's probably a better example. I can go grab my shovel and start digging, right? And solve the problem, right? There needs to be a hole in the ground, and something's broken or someone didn't, I can go get my shovel. I can call my friends. We can get our shovels. We can dig that hole, right? And you can fix problems like that in the services industry. When you get into software, you're going to, and this analogy is just right off the top of my head, so forgive me. In software development and product management, you're going to dig that hole and you're not going to be able to jump out of it, and that's a huge problem. And that I think a mistake that people make is it's very, very different. There needs to be a lot more planning and steps involved. And this article does a good job of kind of focusing on that, right? You make the mistake of just thinking about technology and not an actual product and all the things that it encompasses. And I think that's certainly very interesting. A product needs to solve a problem, right, Michael? Technology can just do whatever it wants. It's technology. Hey, it's cool. Lights come on, there's stuff flying by on my screen. I found this cool thing. But a product has to solve a problem. And that's often, I see the disconnect between technology and product. And there's lots of other great things in this article too.
Yeah, it's if you find yourself looking at something going, okay, it's nifty. Wait, what does it do? I don't get it. Or, wow, that seems really cool. How would I use that? That's a signal to go improve your story. And I'm on that cusp. I'm not quite a product, but I'm not quite a service.
You're kind of a blending of the two.
Yeah, and so what's interesting was a lot of this appealed to me, right? So let's say instead of skipping steps in a development process, it was learning how to better explain the different pieces of it so it will stand alone and I don't have to be there to hold somebody's hand. As I'm doing these early cohorts, you're right, I can just say, hey, Paul, let's get on a call and we'll talk it out in 30 minutes and it's really solid. What I think I'm doing is smart is at least I'm taking really aggressive notes while I'm doing that. And I step back and go, oh, okay. But, I had a call with a guy that this week, and it's interesting. He's a big supporter, a big fan, and he said, look, I got to tell you, I don't actually understand what the hell you're talking about. And I said, cool. Can we hash it out? He's like, absolutely. We got to the end, and I went, okay. I see 2 key assumptions that I've made that apparently don't hold up. Tested it out with 3 other people, and I went, oh, well, now it makes sense. Click. Okay, I got some work to do. So I thought that made sense because I think sometimes that, the big lesson I've learned lately is it's execute. So number 2, thinking that the idea is more important than the execution. Nope. What I'm finding is execution and consistency are going to out hustle the idea almost every single time.
It's kind of interesting. Michael Tangi was talking about hitting the SMB. And I think I think why there's a gap there, some of the things that we're talking about, is that it's super hard to get people's attention, tell them how you solve a problem, and just let them go do it without any kind of hand holding. Like in an enterprise sale, there's a lot of hand holding, demos, that kind of thing. And with a security product, it can be kind of hard to understand, like, how does this solve my problem? So when you want to bring that to the masses, right, you want to have not 10 customers, you want to have 1,000 customers, and you want them all to get it enough so that they're renewing their subscription every year.
Yep.
That's hard. That's something I'm struggling with today, right? Because that's a potential market for our startup, certainly. And the Amazon Marketplace enables that for a lot of startups. However, what we see in the Amazon Marketplace are big name companies where a lot of people know what they do and what problems they solve, like Palo Alto and Checkpoint.
Yeah, and think about that.
And people go buy it.
They've spent millions of dollars doing that, and you know, I look at it because I was talking to somebody earlier today. Right, I work with everything from early stage startups all the way up to Fortune 10 companies, because when we go look at the fundamentals of how we communicate and how we prioritize stuff, it applies a little bit differently, but it's kind of consistent. Here's what I find when you're in the enterprise: they have a budget for something, or at least they have a line item. They may not have a budget for your thing, but they have a budget. There's a controls process in place. They have somebody who gets tasked with go figure this out, go solve this problem. When you go to the SMB space, and I like the way that you were asking about how you define that, but even up to like, you know, maybe even 100 employees, their budgets are tighter. They're running a little bit leaner typically because they've got so much stuff that they're trying to figure out. So we've got a couple challenges there. They've got all the friction that they've got as a startup or as a smaller organization. But then they have the security is complex. It's complex for us that are in the industry. So now I'm coming to somebody who already has stuff on their balance sheet that they need to go take care of, and I'm saying, oh, by the way, you know how in the 90s we said internet bad, firewall good? Yeah. Well, so there's more to that. They're like, no. I got my AV. I got my firewall. I'm good. I'm a small company. No one's coming after me. What are you talking about? Mm-hmm. And so to your point, there's a lot more hand-holding. But then as you get smaller down that stack, it's also looking at, well, you know, my water heater just blew, and I'm going to have to take some cash out of the company to handle that. Mm-hmm. And how much money do you want for this thing again? Yeah, that doesn't sound like a good choice to me. And so it's a tough trade-off, and I get that. So I think he's right. Michael is right that there's a real opportunity there for people. And so to your point, then, it means that when we're developing these products and these even services, these solutions that meet those needs, we have to match people where they are. Don't make the mistake of saying you got to dumb it down. That's not the right. You got to match. You got to match their situation and show them how you elevate them. And that takes time. That takes a lot of time. I mean, listen, if anybody listens to talk radio, I don't know how much it is on sports. I don't listen to sports. I watch sports. I don't listen to sports radio too much. But I'll pick up talk radio every now and then. I'm hearing stuff for Barracuda all the time.
They are probably the number one security company that's spending the most on general branding. And you're not the first person to say that, too. A lot of people told me when they sit in an airplane, in the screen, and there's a screen in front of you, there's a Barracuda logo on it. They're in the airports. I heard a rumor one year they gave out their T-shirts to homeless people hanging out around the Moscone Center for RSA. I don't know if that's really true.
I heard that rumor.
They did have a car. They had a car that was driving around though with the Barracuda logo on it. So
you know, I mean, it's but you know, like, but what I always look at specifically, or what I find fascinating, and you know, maybe we'll start calling it out on the show. So if you're listening or watching now, and you see an example where you see a security company making a play, but in a non-security channel. You're at the ball game. You're at a kid's event. You're somewhere else, and it pops up. Let us know about it, because I think that's interesting, and I think there's probably some lessons there to start to take a look at it. Now, on the same thing, I put up a blog, and this is interesting, right? Because it came from me. There was it's on DFIR threat hunting. And it's the title is The Hunting Cycle and Measuring Success. So, Paul, here's why I put this up. As I'm reading it, it's talking about, well, hold on, you got to define your problem, and then you got to make sure you're ready for it, and then there's got to be a value in it, which is why we got to measure it, and then how are you going to communicate that? So I'm going, okay, I'll keep reading. This is my
I think they listened to the show or something.
I was excited about it, but I also thought, okay, but this is an area you know a ton about. So what I was kind of curious is, how did they do in terms of your experience of getting this right or not? And it was written by Jack Crook. I don't know Jack.
I don't. figuratively and literally. I don't know, Jack. How's that? And I didn't read the article, admittedly. So, but if I had to think about how you would measure threat hunting, I think it's really, and to kind of tie that into when are you ready for it? I don't think it's a technology for someone that doesn't have a security program, right? Because it's somewhat equivalent to, well, I don't lock my doors and I leave all my windows open, and but on the inside there's this awesome like laser that just zaps people that walk into the house. That's not the way security should work, unless it's deception, like Michael's talking about, where, well, they think that door is open and that's where I'm going to, but really I just get zapped by a laser, which we've given presentations on, and turns out that's illegal to set traps for people. And I have some really funny stories about that, maybe for another time. But I do think that you need to have a foundation of security, and I'm actually, I don't know, I just kind of fell into this, like working on what some of that foundation is from presentations that I've given and reviewing some materials that are out there. And I think for smaller companies, certainly it's not in the cards, but when you get into some of the large ones, yeah, like define where your assets are, where your information is, and who owns what, and then focus on building some basic building blocks. Then use threat hunting to, one, validate that your security processes are working or not, and go back and make changes, right? Because threat hunting, you're looking for something that's been compromised. And you know what? If I've got this AV product, let's say, or endpoint protection deployed to all of my systems, and I'm doing threat hunting, and I keep finding malware in all these systems, don't spend your money on like more threat hunting. Go solve some of those fundamental problems that have a potential to prevent that malware from getting on your system. So that's where I see.
Oh, you know what? That gives me an idea, Paul. So one of the metrics then I'd start looking at is how many things are you finding, are you resolving, right? Because here's the risk with anything like this. We fall into, I found X number of things. It's called counting. That's not measuring. No. What we want to understand is, how quickly are you finding stuff? How deep does it go? How quickly are you resolving it? Actually, are you resolving it? How many things are no longer an issue? Let's go back to your earlier point from like a service. Did you resolve that incident, or did you make a material change in the environment to delay or prevent things like that in the future? Right. I'm not all in on prevention all the time. I like prevention. I also like the ability to detect and respond. So I thought it was interesting. I thought it was, if you get time to read it and you see something that really sticks out at you, I'd love to see it. But it was kind of like, hey, look, there's a blend of stuff that we can talk about. So I was a little excited about it.
Yeah, and I think protection is pretty poorly defined when you're doing a kind of like the value statement for any kind of solution in security. Protection, I think people think of protection as like there's a firewall that's going to stop something, or there is a something that's going to stop something, when I think there's a whole other level of protection that's like make it so that the problems don't exist in the first place, so that there's nothing you have to worry about blocking. And I think it's where like the firewalls are a shining example of that, and why many were opposed, because it's not solving the actual problem, right? It's masking the actual problem. You got to do something. Nobody's doing everything. I mean, there are very few, and John Stren and I talked about it, like very few companies that are really, really like doing it really well and solving all those fundamental issues. That's hard. In like 75 or 100 pen tests a year, he's like maybe 3 or 4 customers were like, yeah, wow, like you're really getting it. Really low percentage. I'm actually going to work to hopefully try and change that. But there you go. So, when you come in with a solution and people say, well, we're not patching all of our systems. And I'm like, you need threat hunting. Like, yeah. Depends on your perspective, right? So that's my take on that article.
So what you think about firewalls? Firewall, schmirewall, threat hunt, baby.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, let's point out something else that I think is interesting, because I'm starting to see more conversation in the industry right now around the distinction between prevention and what we label prevention, which is really just I'm going to detect something and then take an action, which is maybe preventative, maybe it's detective, but so it's just we seem to complexify security a lot.
Ooh, that's an interesting word, complexify.
You know what I've started doing now is I tell people that that when they choose Straight Talk, they need to go simple instead of complexify. So
I like it.
It's
very smooth. It's very smooth.
I'm gonna try it a little bit more, but it's. I think it's important. I want to keep having those types of conversations. So, all right, let's talk about playing nice with traditional companies. So these two are going to go together. SL Partners came out and they said, "Hey guys, when you're starting up and you're excited, don't smash mouth. Don't bash the big guys. Don't be like, hey, we're the startup, so you should do business with us because they're old and stupid." Because they basically said, well, here you go. This is the money shot right here. It's like the third paragraph in. While most startup founders dream of initial public offerings, an acquisition by a larger company is a far more likely outcome.
I mean, but this is just a life lesson.
I think it's a good lesson.
And it's interesting. Excel is one of the initial funding rounds for Tenable was, I think the first funding round for Tenable was Accel rather. And there's just some backstory there. But this is a life lesson. You know, I think back early on in my career, I had a friend that had been in not just networking technology, but security before security was a thing, and was very much a mentor to us. And I should have listened to him more. I think I get it now, obviously, but back then, not so much. But, you know, I'd sit around with my other friends who knew this friend, we'll call him Bob, right? People that knew Bob, and I'd be like, I'm like, Bob doesn't ever say anything bad about anyone. Like, even if we try to get him to say something bad, like we're feeling frustrations with someone, whether it's someone we work with, whether it's a partner, whether it's a consultant, whether it's a product vendor, we've got frustrations. We're young. We're venting our frustrations. Like, Bob never says anything bad about anyone. And you know what? Everyone really likes Bob. And there's something to be said about that. This is the same thing. Like, just, you don't say bad things about people. I love Michael's kind of take on all the business and startup sales and marketing books. Like, they basically all say the same thing. And one of the things they all say is don't talk bad about people. Right? That's just the
life thing. I mean, look, to your point, it's a golden rule. It's a life lesson. But, one of the things that's helped me with it, because every now and then somebody will say, well, don't you have an opinion? Aren't you? Yes, we're human. But here's what I started to realize. And we've seen this quote a number of ways attributed to a number of people. Everybody's going through something. And if you can have the emotional intelligence to step back, take a deep breath and say, okay, hold on. Let me look at this from their perspective. Are you always going to be solid with it? No. But, I've started to notice that sometimes you get into these tense situations. My advice, short run, take a deep breath, go for a walk. Worst case, sleep on it overnight. And then don't make it worse. And what you start to find is, you know what? You can find good things to say about people, or you find you have nothing to say, and that's okay too.
You've given good advice on by accident, Michael, is when you talk
I always love the accidental good advice.
It's like accidental good advice. You talk about looking at things from different lenses, right? And we've put that in the context of security, right? You're sitting around with the stakeholders and administrators and data owners, and you got to look at the problem or the issue or whatever, even the solution, right, from everyone's lens. And I'm like, that's great marriage advice too. I've used that in my marriage, and it helps kind of explain things, right? Because as you've got 4 kids, I've got 3 kids. Sometimes it's really hard. Actually, most of the time, it's really hard to like slow down and think about what it's like in the other person's lens, because you're so busy and caught up in what's going on. But that's a really important thing, not just in business and in startups, right? It's also an important thing when you're selling to a customer to look through it from their lens. That's just, an exercise that kind of plays into this that helps your business, helps your startup, and relationships in general, right?
You know what? I'm going to take that as a compliment, and I'll share with you something that tickles me when it happens is I've had a number of clients over the years that they'll come to me and they'll say, my spouse can always tell when you're in town. And I'll say, why is that? And I go, I seem to communicate better at home. I listen a little bit more. I'm a little bit more calm. And I'm like, all right, that's cool. And lately with Straight Talk, I've had people in both of the cohorts come back and say, so I've been using this at home with my kids and with my spouse, and And I'm always like, and they go, oh no, it's good. In fact, we're all using it now, and that's great. That's exactly the goal. Look, I mean, here's the secret to most anything in life. There's a set of universals, and if you can figure out those universals, you can get rid of a lot of complexity, and then there's still a lot of variability in it, and so you can be unique. In fact, that's the big lesson. You can be unique. You are unique. Celebrate that. But your uniqueness is not in competition with stuff that's universal for everybody else. And so, I thought Michael shared a lot of good advice on that. I thought there was a lot of good advice there too. Now, I had this other article, and for some reason the link here is it's not resolving properly. But basically, McKinsey, I love a lot of their stuff. They've got a great digital strategy group. And what they said is, okay, so now you're a startup and you get merged in. You get consumed, and what do you need to do with it? And I wanted to point out two things that I really liked to it. First of which is it said, got to have a vision, right? So you'll hear me talk about that as a better tomorrow, and here's why, and here's the difference between a vision and a better tomorrow. Vision statements, when they're executed properly. Now, I'll be fair, understanding mission, vision, and purpose, I think it took me a decade to really understand the difference between each of those. And if there's sufficient interest, we can do a spinoff sometime, or we'll do a short segment on it and help people get it. But vision statements, right? It's what you see for the future. Better tomorrow, that's literally what are we aiming at tomorrow? Why am I showing up at work? The vision statement's great. It's a good guiding principle, but the better tomorrow, right? Paint the picture of a better tomorrow. That's the way I like to say it. And that's so you're using a visual, you're creating an emotion, but you're showing me something that's much more tactical. It's in the next couple days to the next couple months, maybe 18 months. I wouldn't go too much further than that for the better tomorrow. So
have you seen John Woo's movie A Better Tomorrow yet, Michael? We talked about this before. We talked about this before, and I gave you homework to go watch A Better Tomorrow with Chow Yun-fat and directed by John Woo.
I didn't do it yet. Is it on Amazon? I canceled my Netflix subscription.
I did too. I was
pissed off, so I went to Amazon. Is it on Amazon?
I don't know.
All right. I'm going to take a note. I will get on that, sir.
You can't. The title. You can't not forget the title, right? Ties into your straight talk, right?
No, I'm good. I'm on it. So here's the thing. The point was when you're coming into it, there's got to be a vision that unifies the teams. The reason that they acquired you, or the reason that you merged, that's got to be clear, and it's got to be consistent throughout the entire organization. Now, what I can tell you in most places when I've been involved in those situations, it's not. It's assumed it is. And so there's a really simple way to test for it. Find somebody who's not directly involved with it and have them go ask 10 people what they think the better tomorrow looks like. And then come back and show me the results, or show anybody the results. Guarantee you, in most cases, it is not what you think it is. We overestimate our ability to communicate. We overestimate that people are going to understand it. I've made those mistakes. You've made those mistakes. Other people are going to make them. That's just kind of the way that it goes. The second thing they talked about was use evidence. Which I like, right? Because you'll hear me talk a lot about emotional intelligence and emotion and empathy. And what they're saying is, hey, as you guys are coming together and you're figuring out how to operate together, go evidence-driven. Right. Here's the goal we're trying to hit. Here's the evidence. Let's go do it that way. And I think it's good advice. So anyway, I thought that was good. I want to talk about some of the companies because, I was just curious your take on this because this is a space I'm not a coder, but I thought it was interesting. So Sonar Source, it came up, right? Our favorite secret owler. It came up and it said, "Hey, since you follow Veracode, you might want to."
Yeah. You were telling me this before. So this is a new a startup.
No, that's the crazy part. This is why I thought it was interesting, and I wanted to share it, and I wanted your take on it, and I wanted to see if your take matches mine and if our audience agrees. So it was Sonar Source. So I look at this, and it pops up, and it says, by the way, they just took a $45 million minority round.
What is
That's
that? What is a
big amount of money.
What is a minority round?
I had to go look it up. So if I understood this properly, here's the deal. That's the only round of equity they've ever taken. And the reason it's called a minority round is because they didn't get a majority stake of the company for $45 million.
Oh, interesting. And what's the name of the company?
Sonar Source.
Sonar Source.
So here's the thing. So they do, the way that they describe it is open source platform to provide code quality inspection applications and services for developers. They're based out of Geneva. It looks like they started in 2008, and they've essentially bootstrapped, and they have an impressive list of clients. I mean, I had never heard of them. To me, everybody knows who Veracode is. I mean, I knew who Veracode was. And so I thought it was interesting. But here's what I think is kind of interesting. So I then went and I looked at how much money Veracode's taken in. Veracode's taken in a total of $106 million in funding. Mm-hmm. And this company's taken in $45 million in funding. So I just thought it was interesting that somebody would take such a huge round. It was a minority round. And then let me look up who it was again. It was Insight Venture Partners. So again, when I look at stuff like this, and this is where I'd be happy to be educated from the VC that come and join us and stuff. If you're willing to put $45 million up, take a minority round, it tells me that you see something in this marketplace. You see something in this particular company and their traction. Mm. And the reason that you take on $45 million is because you need to fund some sort of an expansion and you're not ready for an IPO or you don't want to be acquired. I mean, how do you see it? And since it seems like it was a new company to you too, so kudos to Al.
And is it called? Is it Sonar Source?
Yep, SONARSOURCE.
Interesting. I have not heard of this company before. Sonar Sourcing, maybe?
Nope, Sonar Source.
Anyway, I can't find it. I think that's very interesting, and I agree with you. I think they're onto something if they're going to take that level of funding, for sure.
Yeah, sure. The whole thing was interesting, and so again, when we talk about startups, when we talk about funding, and we've started now to talk to a couple of VCs that want to come on the show, so we'll bring them on. And one of the things I flat out asked was, hey, will you give us a primer? Will you tell us some of the things that you look for, some of the things that you consider? And it was interesting because they were like, oh yeah, sure, but and like on our quick chat call, it was like, well, there's this type and this type, and I was like, whoa, hold on, I got to take notes. All right, I'm coming up to speed pretty fast on this myself. So.
Yeah, and this is a crowded market, and you're right. They have some impressive customers. A unique approach to develop a better software by improving security, reliability, and maintainability of applications. That's like something everyone wants, right? I like it.
Yeah, look, I got to tell you, I mean, I pulled it up, I looked at it there, and they were talking about their technical debt and the leak periods. Like, it was a lot of stuff, and I've reached out to a couple of folks that I know that are more in this space to say, hey, did you ever use this? And they've all said the same thing. So it seems to me like it is not widely U.S. based. So now what I'm curious is that $45 million from Insight Partners, is that going to start pushing globally? Is that going to start pulling? Are we going to start seeing them more in the States? I mean, they're already working with global companies. So what sparked my interest was $45 million minority round, and it's the only round of equity funding that they've taken at all. And what that tells me is if you build a company and you're solving a compelling problem, they're using an open source model. And so that means like a lot of the stuff that we've talked about, they've stayed very dedicated. They've apparently done a bang up job based on just the brag sheet that we're looking at. Then they're big enough. I mean, Owler's estimating their revenue at $7.5 million. I have no idea, right? That's an estimate. But still, I mean, to take on a $45 million round and it to be a minority round, I mean, it doesn't tell us a percentage, but think about what that means from a valuation perspective. So I thought that was interesting. I put up another link here, and I'll tell you what, I've started to pull some of these, so we'll get some of these articles. It had two things. It had the books that some of the top VC in Silicon Valley are reading. There weren't a lot of surprises on there. Some I've read, some I'm going to go get to and read. But what I did enjoy was either the blogs that they write or the blogs that they read. And so I've now rotated those into what I start to look at on a pretty regular basis. And I got to tell you, there's some great stuff in there, not just for startups. It's about, as we've said, those life lessons and other things. But now I got to ask a different question. We almost always cite Shark Tank. We haven't. We almost always mention Silicon Valley. We haven't. I got to ask, Paul, do you watch on CNBC, do you watch The Profit or Billionaire Buyer or Make Me a Millionaire?
No.
Inventor?
I watch none of those three shows. Do you watch Halt and Catch Fire? I like the drama.
It's on my list of things to start watching. Yeah, no, it's you mentioned it last time, and I believe it's on Amazon. So I marked it as I'll binge watch this when I get time. Pretty much now, if it's regular TV, I don't watch it. But at night, I'll sit there and I'll watch these other shows. And I'm really fascinated with Billionaire Buyer. It's It's nice. But again, what I'm enjoying about these shows so far is it's not overly dramatic. They're looking at some of these same fundamentals that we talk about.
Right.
And so it's fun. So if you're trying to do this, if this is something you're interested in, what I recommend is look at those shows and then ask questions or think about, if I was in that situation, what would I do? How would that work? And it was great. I'll tell you, the one that I loved was it was the last episode of Make Me a Millionaire Inventor. So what they do is they have two people that are pretty educated themselves. Like one's a mechanical engineer, one's a chemical engineer, or a PhD in chemistry or something. And then they go out and they work with two different inventors that have some sort of an idea. They've invented it and they're kind of stuck, or they're not sure where to go with it. They have a company called Bluefish Concepts in LA, and they help people, right? They're a contract company that helps you get your idea ready to prototype, ready for market, right? So your MVP is tightened up. And then they help people work on pitches, and they introduce them to a VC. And some of these people are not ready. Some of these people are not mature enough, and then some of them are. The one I saw this weekend was great. It was the last episode. I watched it over the weekend. They had the guy had a creation. It was like a picnic table you can put into a trailer hitch, basically. So he's pitching the guy, and I don't know. He's asking for like $200,000 for 25% stake of the company. So the guy's listening to him, and he's going, "Well, how are you going to do this? How are you going to do this? How are you going to do this?" Guy didn't have any answers. He said, "Okay." And I'm thinking, "Oh man, this guy blew it." And the VC said to him, "How about I invest $500,000, but I want 80% of your company. And in fact, I want you just to go back home and raise your son and be happy. I'm going to give you a royalty of 5% on everything that we sell. You keep 20% of the company. But let's be fair. You invented something to create a better life. This isn't really what you want to do. It's not really what you do. It's what I do. I love your concept. How about that?" And the guy starts tearing up, and I'm going, "Oh no, don't blow it, dude. Don't
blow it. Go just yes."
What are you doing? No, you say yes. And what he said was, "I couldn't have asked for anything more. This is great. Yeah, I'm in. That's great." And I was like, okay. So what I like about some of these shows now too is it's not high drama, and a lot of the times the answer is, "You're too early stage for me." Well, your valuation is, I don't even know where you came up with that. And so I wanted to just point out that, I'm going to keep looking at resources. And so if you're watching this, those are some things that we like, and you can find us on Twitter and on Facebook and on other places, and you can have those conversations with us. All right, so I know we're running tight on time. So how is your journey going, Paul?
The journey's going good. There's really no updates that I have on our journey. We're just kind of plugging away at it. So no real updates for me.
All right, so some quick updates for me. I got back into blogging again and writing pretty consistently. Obviously, I write for CSO. My goal now is to start putting stuff up on LinkedIn. So if you're connected with me on LinkedIn, I'd love for you to check it out. If you're not connected with me on LinkedIn, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Let me know you watched the show. But I put up one today on speaking, or I put it up yesterday. And my point was, if you're doing a presentation, get on with it. I see too many times where we do these awkward good mornings and how are you and whatever, and then we want to put the sheet, "Hi, this is my name and this is who I am and this is my dog and my cat and my kids and I went mountain biking over the weekend and here's all this and here's all the places I've been and the companies I've worked." And
but I will say, Michael, that I somewhat disagree with you there. I think that you should introduce yourself. However, there's a caveat there. You should set the context as to why you're an expert for that audience and for the topic that you're speaking at. So unless I'm speaking about how to raise pets, then I'm not going to tell you about my dogs or whatever. And unless I'm speaking about parenthood, I'm not going to talk about my kids and my family life.
Here's the difference. You can have or should have somebody else introduce you.
Yeah, I like that. And that is actually better. I agree with that. That is better because it's like third-party validation. Like we got Paul because he's an expert on this, right?
That's exactly right. Now here's the second piece of this, though. For whatever reason they're sitting there, let them judge based on the quality of your content and the character that you bring to it, whether it's worth paying attention to or not. Standing up and saying, "I'm a big, swinging, awesome person, and you should listen to everything I'm about to say," makes most people go, "All right, so what games do I have on my iPhone today?" But if you just get in there, look, we all know when you're talking to somebody, like we see it when we're interviewing people, they know their stuff. You can tell. It's just a great conversation. It flows easy, and you learn a lot in the process. And so my argument is, just get on with it. Somebody's already made the decision to listen to you. You got about 30 seconds to get their attention and hold it, and they'll make another decision point at about 2 minutes, and then they'll carry on from there. The only other piece that I'll add to it, too, then, is that I've started learning a lot. So I'm still in this, Fun iterative cycle. A couple things. I've extended cohort 2. It's more like a 2.5 now, pretty much out to the end of the year. I made a big pivot. We'll talk about it more when we've got more time, but it's looking at teams and how to work with teams. Turns out we're not, we build leaders in communication, but what we're really doing is showing people how to take friction out of their environment to solve problems faster, to unlock value faster. Okay, so we've started now to start a couple teams into it. Loving the approach. That's changing. In that vein, I wrote up a piece this week on what Straight Talk really is, and I'm actually going to revise it and run it on LinkedIn, I think, next week, but I'll give everybody here a preview. Straight talk is not kicking somebody in the teeth. It's not, I'm going to tell them the way it is, and they're going to have to deal with it. That's just being an asshole. That's not straight talk. Straight talk is a mindset. It's a skill set. It's an experience. It's when you understand who you're talking to and you simplify over complexify. It's when you decide that you're going to talk in a plain, direct way, and you're going to get right to the point about what's valuable to them. That's the key. But when you start using this as a mindset and a skill set and all sorts of other stuff, it gets better. I've started to identify other areas that I can explain better, so you guys are going to see more of that, and we're going to keep moving it forward. But I'm back on the writing side. So if you guys got questions on Straight Talk or things that you want to know about, shoot them into me. Stuff on startups, shoot us in. If you got stories or things you want our opinions on, let us know, because we're going to... I'm excited for what we have lined up between now and the rest of the year. And Paul, I think we've got some really good stuff set up for next year.
Absolutely. Michael, thank you very much. Special thanks to Michael Tanji. Thanks everyone for listening and watching. That's this episode of Startup Security Weekly. See everyone next week.